and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Amber from Baixian.
I'm Erica. We are the hosts of today's section, but before we officially start the section, would you all please say hi in the chat so that we know you can all hear us clearly? And also turn on your camera and give me a big thumbs up and your big smile. Well, I can see that there are a lot of familiar faces and a lot of scholars joining us today. Welcome! And now I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Kyle Obermann. Kyle is an award-winning conservation photographer and writer. His work documents the evolution of China's nature reserves, national parks, and grassroots environmental groups. He has worked with National Geographic, the Nature Conservancy, Conservation International, BBC, and Chinese National Geography. He was also runner-up for the Adventure Photographer of the Year and Exploration of the Year in China in 2018 and 19. Let's join us to welcome Kyle. Hello, Kyle.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for that generous introduction. Thank you.
Hello, Kyle. Where are you now?
Well, I'm currently, as you can see from my glorious Zoom background, I'm in Qinghai.
Oh, so you're now in Qinghai.
There it is. The Zoom background says it all.
Oh my God, I really want to meet you in person.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe I can. Where are you guys? I mean, I can try to make it over there. I don't know. It's kind of tough these days.
Of course, we are in Hong Kong. It would be great if you can come to Hong Kong.
Do you have any magic to come here?
I mean, I don't know. Okay, well, 1 second. I can do. Hold on 1 second.
Oh my God, where are you, Kyle? Where are you, Kyle? Hello?
What's up?
Oh my God, you're from virtual to live.
Oh, that was a big trip. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Only you 1 second from Qinghai to Hong Kong, Baixian's office.
Yeah, it's Gaotie, high-speed rail these days. It's really something, I gotta say. Wow. Okay. Wow, here we go.
Okay, welcome, Kyle.
My name is Kyle Obermann. 我的中文名叫欧阳凯，我已经在中国探险5年了。我早就爱上了这里，中国的景色、文化和人。我会一直继续探索。Weather's moving in. Just absolutely beautiful evening right now. Look at that. Wow, 太美了。Kind of got some altitude sickness. Beautiful sunset. Yeah, but it's kind of fun. 我第一次来到中国的时候，好像对它一无所知，不知道这里是否有多长多样，有多少东西在等着我发现。每个角落都像是新的东西，每次转身都有新的发现。这就是中国原来吸引我的原因。2004年，我拿到了北大孔子学院的奖学金，我是田径队第一个外国人，他们也帮我学到中文。我也在环境科学学院上课，在中国的天文做志愿者，然后毕业后拿了背包和相机去探索。And that changed my life forever. 在我站那边，大多数人都说中国太拥挤，人太多，认识大自然太少，全部都是城市。But that's just not true. 刚过去的5年，我看到了另外一面，更大的一面。我见过和认识的中国是无比美丽的，而我现在的使命就是用我的相机去分享它，探险它，保护它。在这个过程中，我走过了3个国家公园，20个保护区，我拍过100多个护理员。如果美丽中国值得他们的付出，那我也会尽力。
喂，我们照的有那个野生动物。哇，大熊猫！哎，下一张，哎，你看大熊猫。哇哇！
temperature is 6 degrees Celsius.
现在很小，将来会很大。
这里是地球上最美的地方之一，这边的绿水青山只是金山银山。我不仅想保护它，而且通过我的镜头，让全世界爱它的环境，爱它的人。我是个自然报的摄影师，来自美国，这是我的中国故事。
Thank you everyone for showing up here on a Friday night. It's very kind of you to give your Friday night to this. And I'm excited to share with you. So my name is Kyle. I'm a conservation photographer. As the video said, at that point I'd been in China for 5 years, but now it's more like 7. And most of my work is in China's nature reserves, national parks, working with the Chinese forest rangers, documenting their lives, their work, and their efforts to protect China's most endangered species and most beautiful landscapes. And so today I'm going to share a bit more about my story, about how I came to China, how I got myself into this insect-ridden mess, and why I love it and why I'm still doing it, and how I think it makes a difference. This is just a quick map to show a lot of the places I've been in China. I've worked with many, many great Chinese NGOs. I would encourage you, we don't have time to talk about them all now, but encourage you to maybe just take a picture of the slide. And when if you speak Chinese, or if you don't, you can still look up these great NGOs in China that do great work. They've hosted me across 20 different nature reserves in China with over 200 forest rangers. And so today we'll be sharing stories, and we're going to go on a virtual tour in lieu of COVID and not be able to come with me in the mountains. I'll take you into some of these stories and the incredible places I've been. But first, a game. I think everyone's probably been zoomed out right now, so I think having games is a little bit more fun. So how this is going to work is going to be very short. I'm going to show a series of 2 images, two at a time. I want you to guess which image is China and which is the US. So again, I'm from the US, so that's what I chose. So let's just see how we do. All right, one is China, one is the US. You can put in the chat if you want. You can say to yourself, you can shout out loud. You're on mute, so it's up to you. All right, so that's the first pair. Second pair, right? One is China, one is the US. Let's see how much we get right here. Again, feel free to say bottom or top in the chat. See how we're doing. Last pair. All right. Last pair does have a hint. I think the road gives it away. There's, I'll say that there's a hint there. But here it is. Here's the split. So there it is. You can kind of self-grade yourself. What did you expect? What did you think? I know that when I first see these images, I'm shocked. When I first, for example, the top middle photo, that's my photo in Shanxi province in a small village. I was blown away. There was a canyon like that resembled my home in the United States. And I think for a lot of people, we associate natural beauty with perhaps the European Alps or New Zealand or Yellowstone National Park in the US. But when we think of China, we kind of get caught in this, China's developing so quickly, so it's high-speed rail, it's Beijing and Shanghai, like crowded cities. But we kind of forget that actually China is just as big as the United States as far as landmass, and it's actually the 3rd most biodiverse country in the world, right? It's only superseded by Brazil and Colombia. So actually there's so much in China. And I started with this question when I was a student of, why don't we know this? When I was studying Chinese, why didn't I realize that? This is a very interesting publication, but in 2015 from the New York Times, cover story, and life in China smothered by smog. I respect the New York Times a lot. I love reading them, but this seemed a bit like an exaggeration. I lived in Beijing in 2013, in the smog apocalypse era, and it was miserable. I can attest to that. But it was not life in China. I'm sure that Yunnan was doing okay, and Guilin and Guangxi and Zhejiang, right? So China is much bigger than it's not a monolith, right? It's not a smog-covered monolith, and so that kind of mistaken approach to China really got me into photography and got me wanting to change the dialogue. Of course, it's not just New York Times. I could also point back towards China itself. This is a very interesting website. So it's the Chinese National Park and Protected Areas website run by an NGO affiliated with the government. And this is the About Us page and has a beautiful image, beautiful spread of none other than Scandinavia. I don't know how they got this picture. I don't know where they got this picture, but this is not China. And so there's a confusion. Again, what is China? What does it look like? What does China wilderness look like? They're confused inside and outside, and it's hard. So why does this matter? Who cares, right? Well, it matters because of this black line, which you may know of as the Heihe Tengchong Xian. So you can divide China with poverty, economics, education, population density, all by this line. Of course, Eastern China, gets the population and the economic growth, et cetera. Now, with this map, what it's actually showing is concentration and diversity of mammal species. So the red is actually up to 32 different types of mammal species. And of course, now it's concentrated in Western China, particularly in Southwest China, basically in Northern Yunnan, Sichuan, and Eastern Tibet. And this is where China's biodiversity is. But if you Google, of course, today, if you Google China environment, which is the top image, you get all gray, all smog. But, environment can have an ill connotation in the news. So if you Google Chinese nature, you get the bottom image. And it's still great, but it's all green. That's lovely, but it's actually all Eastern China. So people aren't thinking, they think of China, they aren't thinking of the most biodiverse regions, which is the red region. There's almost no news and nothing associated with that. So if the highest value of conservation areas are areas that people do not think of when they think of China, what opportunities are we losing to support them? And that's where my work comes into play as a photographer and as a dancer. So that's a very short clip, and I kept it short on purpose. I don't want to be too embarrassed this early in the talk. I think, I don't want too many people to sign off. So we're going to keep on going, but dance does tie into this. I can tell you that much. But I am a photographer. That's how I make most of my change is through dance. And taking pictures of landscapes, of people, the beautiful Tibetan plateau, the stories of the rangers who are protecting the pandas in China and the dangers that they go through on a daily basis. Wherever it is, and even the Tibetan Plateau again is one of my favorite places. And I really try to put the lens and the focus on people. Conservation is not just a story of nature; it's a story of how nature and people interact. Right? People have caused the problems, and people are now working to solve the problems. So, for me, any conservation story begins with locals, and it begins with people who are working to change. And these actually has a massive tape measure in his arms because he's actually measuring the retreat of a glacier in the Tibetan Plateau. It's the largest tape measure I've ever seen, probably like 100 meters. Now, I don't though want to, just say I got here and it was really easy and I wasn't some awkward dork, like a couple of years ago. This is me when I first got to Beijing. I'm eating like baozi from a bag on the street. I just got cheated for like 100 RMB for a hat that's probably 15 RMB for a local. And I really don't know anything. And then the pictures on the right are actually when I first started photography. It's like my first Facebook album in like 2008. And when I was in high school, and I was just picking up my camera. I had nowhere to go but my backyard. So I was taking pictures of like weeds and like a fire hydrant and, the shadows of the trees. And that's what I had to go with. And so I do want to talk a little about my story. I think I'll talk a bit more about conservation and change, but I want to go back and talk a bit about my story because I know that many of you are brilliant and you have dreams and goals and you're striving towards those. And it doesn't help anyone to just gloss over and to talk about, all the good things we've done if we can't talk about the struggles of what it took to get there and that journey. So, I don't like it again, normally I put out this photo and it's like, hey, I'm cool. I'm an explorer and all that. But, I have pictures and it's great. I'm very proud of myself that I've come this far, but let's go back in time to where I first began and what that was like. So I'm going to start with when I was at Peking University, learning Chinese, learning Mandarin. It was the gateway to my work, right? I'm sure all of you are probably more multilingual than I am, but Mandarin was the gateway to my work and it opened up a whole other world of working together with students and people. And I was an okay student. I got B's and, an A minus in Chinese. So it wasn't the best. Well, that was my first semester. Well, let's see, second semester. It's a little worse. This gets a little bit awkward. So we got a 65, 36, 39, and 0. I'm just going to skip. I'm going to put this picture so you can't screenshot that just so there's no record of that. Hopefully you haven't taken a picture of that, but that's a little embarrassing. So what happened second semester? I actually did not take any finals at Beida. I left all my classes because I had a photography internship at a travel company in Western China. I don't recommend, this is not like me saying go fail your classes, but I'd already graduated from my undergrad degree actually. And this wasn't even a master's, it was just like a certificate in Chinese. So I made the call, my dream is to be a photographer. I can do these finals. It won't give me a degree. I would much rather do this internship. So I failed. And, but I started my dream job and I started this internship. It didn't really pay, but I started doing photography and I took that leap of faith. I took the sacrifice that maybe teachers wouldn't, expect, or wasn't really normal, doesn't look good on paper, but it was something, right? It got me. So I took my camera and I started shooting around Beijing. But I still had to graduate, and I did. And then I had to find a real job that paid my bills, which of course is a big problem for all of us. How do we make that happen? And I wasn't in a place, to be honest. I did not know how to make photography pay the bills. So I said, okay, never mind. Let's go have an office job. And basically, this is a short video. This is what I did.
Mit Twin-Antrieb vernichtet bis zu 41 Blatt im Streifen und bis zu 30 Blatt im Partikelschnitt. Auch CDs und die...
All right, that's a German ad of, I don't know what German ad, but that is the type of paper shredder that I used for the first 2 weeks of my job to shred all that paperwork. So if you go back to the NSEX versus paperwork, I have a little trauma because I remember when I walked in the first week of my day job, and there's piles of blueprints. I was supposed to be working for intellectual property and corporate security, and it ended up really for me just being a lot of soulless, kind of boring work. I wasn't all shredding, of course. I didn't get to shred a CD actually, like this guy's doing, but it was really tough. And I learned really quickly that I am a person who is incredibly passionate about a small set of things, and I need to be doing those in order to be fulfilled. It's not saying that corporate can't do that for you, but for me, I realized I wasn't going to find that in corporate. Now, it wasn't all bad. I had some great treatment. I lived in a 5-star hotel. I would come home every day and take my spoon and go to the executive lounge and peel off this honey from the honeycomb. That was pretty fun. And then they would give me a wine bottle when I walked in and say, hello, Mr. Obermann, here's your wine. So it wasn't all bad. But then I also realized, and I'm so glad because it taught me that, you know what, money and income isn't going to make me happy. I had an executive expat treatment, and I was miserable because I knew that there was a problem out there. There was conservation, there was wilderness. People didn't know about it, and I wasn't doing anything. And I knew that I could. And it drove me insane. No matter how much money you gave me, that was driving me insane. And that forced me to quit no matter what, right? So I saved up my money for a year. Money is a real problem. And so I saved it up and I quit. And I traded all this luxury for this, a couple guys in their underwear crossing the river, freezing cold river in the middle of the mountains. But I loved it. I mean, it was just the funnest time. So I started working with Conservation International in Beijing. I was living off of my savings. I wasn't making money, but Conservation International got me into these nature reserves. They got me into the places in China that I knew that I wanted to be at, and I knew I needed the resume and the exposure to claim expertise to get more jobs. So I took the job. I still wasn't making that much money. Hardly had health. I think I had travel health insurance, not recommended, but I was making it work. And an incredible habitat here. Very hard though. This is a picture of on the patrol looking for pandas in Sichuan. And the bamboo here is very tall. So there's this forest ranger. He's walking in the bamboo, looking for traces of hunters or wildlife. And you can't see his head because the bamboo is so tall, and you can just see his teapot, where we actually used to make rice in there. The Shawnees, they eat very well. So we carry this teapot, and it's the only thing you can see above the bamboo. The unfortunate thing about bamboo that they don't tell you about pandas is that it's actually covered in leeches everywhere. It's very soggy, very wet, and there's leeches everywhere. If you don't like leeches, don't watch this.
我感觉有个东西在我的手里，哇！你看它这么大，哇，这摇了，摇到脚趾上，摇了一大口啊！
这袜子怎么脱了？怎么搁那袜子？
它应该我不知道。
All right, we'll skip that screen. No one wants to pause on that foot, but I'll tell you what. So when we go back to the question about bugs or paperwork, see, if I said leeches, maybe I would have swung out. But they didn't tell me there's leeches involved in conservation. And I got to say, that is mentally draining. There's nothing like having a leech in your sleeping bag to really make you question your work. And there have been times where I have questioned my work, dangerous times where we've been threatened with frostbite and my camera's been broken and I've just been exhausted and I have wanted to quit. But experiences like these still bring me back, because when I get out of the wild and I start publishing the photos and I start writing about them, I think there's this craziness that goes along with passion where we just kind of forget all the bad, right? We just kind of, once we get out of it and we start looking at what we've done, we're like, well, that was totally worth it. I'll totally do it again. And so these are beautiful, beautiful, incredible places. And it just captures my soul. And I know this is where I want to be. And this is what it speaks to. So the leeches are worth it. But of course, even conservation has its own strange problems. This was a 360 photo from the Sichuan panda breeding base in Chengdu, where the baby pandas are kept. And we were shooting a 360 film for Nat Geo. I was an assistant for Amy Vitale, who's behind that tree. I hate this tree. I just hate this tree. Why? Well, we were supposed to film these pandas, and I had a cold on Monday morning, a little bit of sneeze. On Friday, I was over it. Amy asked me to pick up a baby panda and put it in the tree. And I was like, this is it. This is why I quit my job. Like, this is the moment. And right when I was going to put the panda in the tree, some of the staff said, stop, you had a cold on Monday. And I didn't get to put it in the tree, and it broke my heart. And then basically I had to take pictures of my coworker with the panda hugging his foot, and for his Instagram, not mine. So that was tough. But there have been good things. In 2019, one of my biggest honors for my work, Peking University gave me an Outstanding Alumni Award. I don't know if they remember that I failed my classes, but it doesn't matter, right? So see, and this is where I want to say that grades, of course, matter, right? If you want to get a scholarship, want to go to grad school, yes. But depending on where you're going, it doesn't matter, because people are going to forget your grades, and they're only going to look what you did after college graduation. So, focus on impact. Don't focus on metrics on paper. Focus on impact. Do what you want, and the rewards will come. And I've been expected. I'm on a Chinese TV show. I didn't expect to have a Korean makeup team, make my hair look definitely different than it usually is when I wake up in the morning, which is how it is now. But that was fun too. And I get to share conservation stories, and it's just been such a fun journey. I would never go back. But how I make change, we'll talk about this briefly. I think we face a lot of problems, and whatever industry you're in the world, whether it's conservation or poverty or education or women's empowerment, I think taking an angle of optimism, of pragmatic optimism, is so important. There's a great website called Conservation Optimism I would encourage you to look at. It talks about tools for change makers, how to speak and engage people that leave people feeling empowered, right? You can have a message about climate change that says the earth is doomed. Or you can say, yes, the earth is threatened, but here are the solutions. So a lot of my articles, whether it's in National Geographic or Sixth Tone in China, they talk about, hope, or forging ahead with a plan, or poachers becoming protectors, right? I think we need to have change makers who are looking at driving solution-based change, not just pointing out the problems, but driving the change. And of course, you don't want to gloss over the problems. This is in the Giant Panda National Park, rangers, and there are very real problems, right? I want to document those too. These are wire traps. They're incredibly threatening towards the wildlife there. They're about 10 renminbi on Taobao in China today. You can go and buy one now. And a poacher can put up 100 of these in a day, and a ranger is very hard to find just 2, right? And they snag the animal, they can choke it to death, or just snag it there so it starves to death until the poacher finds it. Yes, the landscapes are beautiful, but I'm not just trying to say that, right? There's also problems, and we need to solve them. It's how do we solve them, right? There's the hiking industry in China is exploding, and they're bringing trash with them and littering everywhere. And a lot of these beautiful places, including this beautiful picture on the right, is not closed to visitors because of the trash problem. Also, it's not just a forest, right? It's not just a beautiful landscape. They're endangered species. And there's an incredible story behind these species. These are the Gaoligong skywalker gibbons, first discovered in China as a new species in 2017. And now there's a local group that is working to protect the last 130 or so within China's borders. And they're doing an incredible job studying and protecting the gibbons. And local anti-poaching associations have also just inspired me. This is an incredible group started by a local ranger in Sichuan province named Yu Jiahua. He's now 70 years old, but in the 70s and 80s, he witnessed rampant poaching in Sichuan, where basically villagers used to use fire, burn the animals up the mountain, where other villagers were on top of the mountain with guns waiting for the animals to run out, right? Because fire burns upward, so it forces the animals to run up out of the trees, and the poachers are on top waiting to shoot them. That was the 70s and 80s. But that poacher, Yu Jiahua, he was actually a poacher too, but he saw this and he saw the widespread destruction, and he said this couldn't go on. So actually in the 90s, he started Sichuan's first anti-poaching conservation association, and today they have 500 villagers, around 13 villages all around the mountain, who have enlisted into this anti-poaching patrol, which is what the photo you see here. Every month they go on patrol for about 7 to 9 days to stop poachers, and this is what a poacher looks like in China still. Very interesting photo caught on camera trap. So this is usually for wildlife, but it caught a poacher. And you can see he's wearing an animal skin. He has a gun that, it looks like it's from 100 years ago, right? Because guns are legal in China, but they can still make their own gunpowder bullets. And he's holding in his hand the wire traps we talked about. But Yu Jiahua and his team have now removed 130,000 wire traps. Just from one man inspiring 13 villages, person by person, they've made an incredible difference. And today, some of the most endangered species are actually coming back to the mountain because of his efforts. And of course, climate change. This is, I think, the last thing I want to talk about as far as an issue. It affects so much. It affects bamboo. It affects, panda habitat, bamboo flowering, bamboo range. It affects glaciers. It affects, sea levels. And this glacier here, this is a local Tibetan. He's a nomad most of the year. But he's part of a conservation association started by Tibetan monks. And every year they go up onto the glacier to measure the retreat. And you can see the glacier is almost black, right? It's brown with rocks and dirt on top of it. And that's because as the glacier melts, all of that dirt that has accumulated for thousands and millennia of years, a lot of it stays on top of the glacier and turns the glacier black. And white reflects light. White stays cooler, but black absorbs it. So the glacier actually heats up. The more it melts, the faster it heats up, and it keeps on going. And a lot of times the indigenous people of the world are the people who have and are going to see the front effects of our climate crisis and of environmental degradation. And a lot of times also their footprint is the smallest, right? A lot of times it's people in the large cities of the world or people in the USA who have the biggest footprints, and yet we're affecting the people in the locals. So this is just a graph here of how fast the glacier is melting. Now, I think it's great to storytell, and I think stories have the ability to bring people to places they couldn't go by themselves, and the ability to inspire empathy and passion and emotion in others. But I think also, as change makers, we need to think about how to give people without a voice a platform. It's not just about me publishing or me having 10,000 or 100,000 followers. It's about giving rangers, the people who are in the front lines and who don't have 100,000 followers, giving them a platform to speak out. So I'm very honored. And honestly, for me, the happiest moments are when my photos help rangers get awards. So whether it's standing in front of my photo, getting an award from Jack Ma, because my photo essay of one of their work helped him win an award, or when I won a video award, the ranger went up on stage and gave a speech in my stead, or Yu Jiahua, who I just mentioned. He's the first Chinese ranger ever nominated for the Explorers Club, ever actually got into the Explorers Club, based in New York, very prestigious global explorer society. And this is when I think my work is actually really paying off. As a storyteller, I always struggle with trying to find measurable impact, or how do I measure my impact? How do I measure an impact of an article? And this is when I'm most happy, is when I can directly relate how my work has lifted up someone. It doesn't have to be a lot of people, but anyone is enough. And then also tying in the power of funding and corporations. I think corporations have tons of resources, and as young people, we need to be very strategic in how we work and pitch for our causes. So a lot of my work, since the NGOs in China don't have large budgets, it's actually funded by for-profits. And it's about trying to see this kind of win-win with for-profits. So I work with the North Face, I work with Sony. They're some of my biggest sponsors for these projects. They sponsored me to shoot a lot of these rangers. And I think this kind of model is something that we should all think about, right? How do we build partnerships? For me, when I was first working my first corporate job, the only way I was able to jump was from networking. That was the most important thing. And now as a photographer, it's still the most important thing. And it's not networking within the conservation community, it's networking outside of the conservation community. It's networking with bankers and engineers and people who are in different fields, because you never know what kind of people or groups can help you and bring into your cause. And also you're gonna learn so much more if you're with a diverse group of people, like I guess, the Bison Scholar community is perfect for that. And so it's very, very exciting and has the potential to, massively impact change when you bring in partners with much more power. So with the North Face, all the sites I would go, and I sponsored the Rangers with North Face apparel and gear. Honestly, just a little token. It's not enough, but just a little token of support, using corporations in their specialty is I think what you can do. And I think we talk about in conservation, we talk about how can people get involved. Well, there's three ways I see mainly. It's money. You can donate money if you have that ability. You can donate time if you want to be a volunteer, or you can donate a skill. And you could say a skill can also be a product, but you can donate a skill, right? If you're good at design, right? So there's a lot of different ways to organize an impact change, whether you're inside or outside an industry. So going back, when I back look at this map, for me, this map isn't just a collection of points and organizations. It's actually, each point is a place where I've been probably the first photojournalist, the first storyteller to come to these places and share these stories. And so for me, I can now measure my impact, not by necessarily, how many great awards I've won, but how many people I've helped. And I think that for me, the greatest source of inspiration for my work. That's too early. We're going to go back. It's not dance yet. But the greatest inspiration of my work is working with these locals. But speaking of dance, let's go move on to dance now. One last video for dance. I promised you my dance a little bit. I get up on Zoom. I can't hear the music. All right, that's it. All right, 10 seconds of dance. Totally get 10 seconds. All right, why dance? So let's go back way to the beginning. Why dance? Well, I do dance. I kind of dance. I try to dance. I'll say that much. But I think passion, again, I'm going to go back to this idea of passion. Of all the things I've done, it's been passion that's helped me the most. And I know a lot of people are struggling with, do I follow my passion? Is it worth it? What are the risks? Am I going to make money? I will say this, while you're young, there's nothing better to do than just go with what lights your soul on fire, and you're not going to fail. And I think a lot of times, there's a great book by Angela Duckworth called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. And she talks about how the real change makers, the real successful people in their lives aren't the people who graduated from Harvard, aren't the people who had the highest GPA. They're the people who just had grit, right? Who every challenge kept on going. Because they had passion and perseverance. And so dance, I'm not the best dancer. I like to humiliate myself, but I put these little conservation messages in them. And I will say that one of my most proud achievements is that I got in the news as a viral dancer for conservation. So, you never know. You never know. And I think for me, it's just an adventure, right? Life is an adventure. And if you're doing what you love, I think the serendipity will come together to make it possible as long as you keep on going, especially in COVID, right? It's challenging us all in how to be more adaptable to sudden changes. But this, I think, is where, really push comes to shove and the change makers come out. They are the ones who persevere and have grit. And again, for me, I'll just say that the biggest source of power for me is lifting others up. Whether it's one person you change or a whole community, it doesn't matter. But I think as long as you're doing something, whether it's in a corporate, whether it's in your own startup, whether it's a freelancer, as long as you're doing something for someone else, to lift someone else up, you will find the greatest source and wealth of perseverance and passion you could ever have. So thank you very much. Feel free to get in touch and follow my Instagram. And thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. So I was wondering, based on your experience, and in terms of efforts for environmental conservation in China, what do you think is going very well, and what do you think is not so going well and needs attention and improvement?
Do you mean when I first started or currently?
Just based on your experience so far, it seems that you've had years of experience observing China's landscape. So yeah. I think you're in a good position to assess the current status as well as how things have been changing.
Yeah, I mean, China's conservation, that itself is a whole nother Zoom, but I'm very excited. I think I started this work kind of in this golden age of conservation in China, where you have this very interesting mesh of issues there are a lot of withstanding issues, whether it be pollution or management inefficiencies, or lack of environmental education in schools. But now you have the government impetus and will and funding to solve these problems. So a lot of my work right now is focusing on China's first 10 national parks, which is just an incredible story. and so I think it's just this very interesting time where a lot of the problems still haven't been solved, but now they're being tackled at an incredibly fast rate, which wasn't true 15 years ago. So I would say that the biggest problem right now, I think, facing China with conservation is how to manage people's relationship with nature, how to manage 1.4 billion people and give them access to nature, right? The US is about the same size. It has national parks, but it has a fourth of the population. So I thought easier to allow people to experience the environment on the environment's terms. How does China do that? That's a big question that's up in the air. But I think what they're doing well is just the amount of funding that is going into creating nature reserves, and also the NGOs. I think the local NGOs are doing an incredible job of mobilizing locals and supporting local groups and focusing on basically poverty alleviation in order to build climate heroes out of the locals.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And we have one more student raising her hands. Is Yabin? Are you raising your hands?
Oh yeah, hello. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I was very impressive because I also love taking photos, like with a film camera though. But then, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I since you're interested in conservation of nature, do you want to kind of expand your field of study into other areas, like other countries or?
Yeah, no, I mean, great question. I think in the short term, I'm still very interested in China just because it's just so big. I feel like I don't know. I think anyone who tells you they know a lot about China is kind of like, a little bit, it's just so big and so diverse. So I think most of the time I'm still very interested in that. But I think in general, I have an interest in people's stories and photojournalism and just, telling these stories. But I think for me, I'll always want to be doing something in regards to nature. That's always just been the thing that's called me. It's kind of funny. I have some urban photographers who, shoot architecture and stuff. And sometimes I go shoot with them in the city and I'll take 2 shots in a day. I don't know what to do. I'm useless. I mean, I'm truly just useless because I don't feel inspired. And so I'm not the kind of photographer who can just take good pictures of anything. Don't ask me to take your wedding. I probably won't do that good of a job, but if it's by the mountains, maybe we can, maybe that'll work. But so it's, for me, I think it'll always be with nature. And I think that's also the problem of our times, is how to solve this issue between humans and nature.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we also got some question from another student. Can you pay? His question is, how do you provide for yourself and afford all those travel? Does it all pay well to be a conservation photographer? If you have to start all over again, what would you do to be a conservation photographer?
Oh, great questions. All right, let's get down to the meat of it. All right, let's do this. How do you provide yourself? So again, I think the moment where I made conservation photography work is where I found a win-win solution where I moved into this kind of corporate social responsibility area. I tried to find win-wins for brands, NGOs, and rangers. I did the kind of grant cycle for a while, and I found that exhausting. Just always applying for new grants, always searching for new grants. For me, it was just very tiring. And I think that sustainable conservation solutions need to be seen as a kind of interesting proposition for funders that they can get a benefit out of too. So that's how I fund my travel, whether it's working with, again, North Face or Sea Trip or whatever organization wants to come on board. I welcome their support into the conservation. I welcome their funding in the funnel into conservation. Does it pay well? That depends on what you're comparing against. It's not going to pay as much, obviously, as many other jobs. But I think there's a standard of living that you require for happiness. And then above that, for me, it's kind of extraneous. And I think science has also proven that. I think there's social research that says above a certain wage, actually happiness really tanks, right? So for me, it's just kind of meeting this wage where I can live comfortably. I'm not hungry. I can go on vacation, but I also know that for me, when I had corporate and I made a lot of money, the only fun thing about making the money was spending it. And so what's the point of that? You're just making money to spend it, and then you're trapped in a cycle that, your livelihood and your debt and your rent, you still have to, and then you're just trapped. So for me, it's I want to keep things to minimum. And I am now happy to say I do live comfortably, and it's quite sustainable. And I think it's all a kind of perspective of what you want. Start over. What would I do as a conservation photographer? That's a great question. Wow. What would I do again differently? I think I would probably just be even more active with reaching out and like pitching to things that I thought I couldn't. Everything I've done that has been great and has been like a career leap has been something that I really didn't think I could do. I just said yes. And I kind of just made it up. I kind of just was like, I can do that. And I was like, and I went home like, oh my gosh, like what on earth? And then I somehow do it. And then somehow I'm at this next level. So I think, I think for me, it would to just be pitching more to Nat Geo. And if I get rejected more, who cares? At least I have the pitch and I can take that pitch to someone else. I think really just like not getting discouraged by failure or intimidation that you're not good enough or that you have to reach a certain level until you're good enough. I think just putting it all out and just putting yourself out there in every way.
Okay, we also received a question from Tiara. She's asking, okay, I know you told us not to fail any of our classes, and I don't think any of us will internationally try to do that.
Good, that's good.
How did you know what is your next path was for you, and how did you ultimately decide to drop school and drop the typical life and go for it?
Yeah, well, again, a caveat with this failure thing, for me, it's just a very strategic decision because, again, I already graduated from my bachelor's. My Peking University program was a Confucius Institute language scholarship. I'd already got the language at that point, and I knew that it wasn't a master's degree. So I knew that for me, like I'd already got the language. Then I had this rare internship opportunity. So it's just really a cost-benefit analysis. Like what's the benefit of just cramming for one more month of school when I have this really rare internship opportunity that will give me a good test to do something, right? And so that was really just a strategic choice that I was able to. If I was actually getting a master's degree, I probably wouldn't have failed. Like I probably would have gotten the degree and then, but it's just where you are and thinking about what you can, marginal costs and benefits. How did I know the path? For me, 1 year of corporate was exceptionally enlightening. I would have always said, probably from college, from undergrad, my dream job as a photographer. I would have never had the courage to do it. No way. Until I got into corporate, I was making that money and I was unhappy. And that's what let me know. And so there's nothing wrong, by the way, of after graduation going the safe route and just doing some job that you're not thrilled about, but pays the bills and lets you figure it out, because that may be the thing you need. Right? And so your job isn't going to decide your fate either way, whether it's your dream or whether it's super boring. When I got in the first job, I realized, well, heck, I'm actually now spending hours outside of job, blogging and planning adventures. And this is fun. I'm like, wow, like, could I make that my work? That would be perfect. And so, that's how I, basically made the decision, this cost benefit analysis and just really being very honest with myself of, where does my joy come from? Hey, I'm in my 20s. There's not much of a big price for failure. Like I'm 23, like let's just go try. And in a way, I'm still doing that. I'm trying, and it's just still working out. So I'm still going, and that's where you may find yourself.
Okay, thanks, Kyle. And then we have the third question from Yun Su. I'm interested in photography, so I want to ask, how do you connect with your models or subject and capture the story or emotion in the photographer? And then also, how any tips for photographing nature? I'm really bad at this.
Well, I'm sure, Yusuf, I could probably learn a lot of photography from you and the other things you're really good at. We should probably, you can probably teach me sometime. But yeah, I think photography, it's quite an interesting thing because it's so little of it is actually about pressing the shutter. Talking to your subjects or getting into these places is all about networking and human relationships. Mm-hmm. And it's making people comfortable, right? I can get to these reserves because the NGOs trust me. The NGOs trust me because the first time I went to the reserve, and that was the critical moment. When I went to the first reserve, I knew I had to kill it because they gave me a test. And I proved myself physically, and for me in the reserve, it's kind of like sports, once you're like on a sports team or if you go through a really trial with any kind of person or a group, afterwards you come out strong, right? So for me, when you're with a group of 10 Chinese Rangers sharing the same tent, eating the same food, like getting bitten by leeches, after 10 days, you're like, dang, these guys are like my best bros, and then they'll speak for you. And that's how you build a relationship, right? I think you build a relationship for a couple of days, and then your photos will come after. They're not going to come when you first meet the stranger. At least for me, it's very hard to meet a stranger and just go. I need to be building that relationship. And then photographing nature, man, I wish there was a guide to it. I mean, there's all sorts of rules of composition. I could say that my best photographs are usually, in the 2 to 3 hours after dawn and before dusk. That always helps. But I think I'm saying it again, but just whatever moves you, take a photo of that. And I think it will be good. I think people will see your passion. So if you see nature, and I think if you see a mountain or a lake or a tree or a bug that you're passionate about, take a photo of it. I think after enough practice, people will see that passion come through.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've got many practical questions it's asking you. Are you interested in the oceanic scenes too? And do you have any knowledge on the photographer techniques and the culture between shooting the mountains and the coastal
area?
Yeah, great question again. I'm currently getting my PADI diving certificate. Actually, I think for me the water is the next realm, massive realm. It's a whole other world. So I'm very interested in the ocean. In Hong Kong, I've been lucky enough to work on the coastal areas and work in the mangroves and the estuaries and with the oyster farmers. And, I think there's really, since I haven't done underwater photography, at least on the coastal areas, there's not much of a difference. I think it's just being prepared for the weather and the conditions, right? It's going to be burning hot and sweaty and muddy and salty, and your gear is going to get wrecked in the ocean, and in the mountains you're going to get, you can get altitude sickness and snow. And so I think a lot of it's just also preparation, because if your gear isn't ready and you aren't ready, then if you get frostbite or if you get sunstroke, you're going to be a pretty bad photographer at that point. So I think a lot of it is, as long as you're doing photos outdoors, it's preparing yourself and your gear for the occasion.
Okay, we have one more question from Ladita. Which is your favorite shot and the most memorable experience, and why?
That's so hard. I think most of my favorite shots that I would say are from this one area called Nianbao Yuze on the Nianbao on the border of Sichuan and Qinghai province. Just Google it. You may find an article that I've written. It speaks for itself, but some of the photos are actually in this presentation. But it's just one of the most special, mind-blowing places in the Tibetan Plateau. Hundreds of lakes and mountain peaks and glaciers. You should go there if you get the chance.
Okay, then we come to the last question. This is very interesting question. Also, it's a question that we usually to ask our scholars. How did you get to know about Baixian?
I'm filling in a form now. It's good. Let's see. So I met Rana I don't know, at a luncheon. Yeah. And this comes back to, I think, the importance of getting outside your circle. There's a luncheon hosted by some friends at JP Morgan. I don't know nothing about finance, but I was just very lucky to have the network and have some friends connect me. And so it all kind of worked out. And so, again, I'm so grateful for that. And I think it also speaks to the only reason I'm here is because I'm out of my box. I'm talking to people in finance, and students. And I think that really expands your network exponentially. It expands what your potential is exponentially. So yeah, get out there. I'm glad I know Baixian.
Yeah, by the way, Kyle was our keynote speaker at the 2019 summer program.
Yes.
We have a resources page on our website. In case you missed the previous sections or you would like to revisit the videos, just go to our website and click those videos. It's good resources for you all. And finally, don't forget to follow our social media, our Instagram, WeChat, Facebook, and also join our Linking Baixian community group.
And thank you for joining us today. We will meet you again in May.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Kyle.
Bye-bye. Thank you.